Welcome to all. You know that as a school head, they have to supervise many things. Mainly, we may think that as a school head, the main task is administrative task. But now the concept is changing. In today's discussion, we are going to discuss about resource maintenance and ICT. And this topic, it is part of the course MES 006, Managing Teaching Learning, which is a course of the program PGDSLM. Now you may be thinking, in the course title that is Managing Teaching Learning, how does this resource maintenance is coming? We know that resource maintenance is an important part while we manage teaching learning process. And what are the resources that we have to manage while we are taking the teaching learning process? And in this session, the focus is upon to develop understanding about the resource maintenance, to identify the areas where ICT can be introduced for this managing teaching learning process. As I have told, this program is specifically meant for the heads of schools and for teachers, that is prospective teachers who will become the head of the school. Generally, as in the beginning I have stated, the main concept that is developing among the authorities of the school when they held the post of the head of the school, they may think that the administrative task. But now the concept of the pedagogical leadership has changed that type of conception. As a pedagogical leader, the heads of the school has to interfere in the teaching learning process. And in this teaching learning process, they have to manage different things. And as a school head, they have to manage several resources. Let us go to a case where a head of the school has to resolve. That is Alice, the principal of a school consisting of diverse population. And what are the characteristics of this diverse population? When we look at the characteristics, we can see that this population consists of students with diverse needs, then students from different socio-economic status, languages, religion, etc., and students with poor literacy skills. Now, when we look at the scenario, we can see that the today's classroom is becoming more multicultural and it is diverse in nature and inclusive in nature. In this context, how to manage the resources, that is the main important thing that we have to discuss. And here, as a principal, she may be thinking that what should I do? So what are the things that a principal has to do? There comes the first point, make a strategic plan for organizing and using school resources. Second one, wants to make sure the resources that exist at the school are appropriate. And the next one wants to maximize the existing resources. The first point that we have seen is a strategic plan for making the resources available. And here in the strategic plan for organizing and using school resources, first a need assessment has to be done. So as a head of the school, he or she should supervise or monitor what are the resources available and make a need assessment, what are the things that need it. And the next one wants to ensure that the resources that exist at the school are appropriate. For example, suppose you want to start a new program. So before taking the admission of the students, what is needed? The infrastructure should be provided. So as a head of the institution, what is needed? The infrastructure is very much needed. Whether we have that much infrastructure to accommodate that much learners, and whether the learners are getting the sufficient resources at least to perform the minimum task. That is an important thing that the head of the school or head of the institution has to make ensure. So before the admission process itself, it is very much important to ensure the availability of the physical resources. We can state it as the first point, that is the physical resources is very much important. And after taking the admission and running for the physical resources, that really creates a shame on the part of the institution. Next part, what we have to discuss is wants to make sure the resources that exist at the school are appropriate. There may be the resources which needs repairment. Some resources needs maintenance. So that thing should be planned ahead. So that is very much important as on the part of the head of the school, and wants to maximize the resources. So the maximum utility of the existing resources is an important thing that the head of the school should ensure. So what are the things that need the maintenance work? What are the things that need the repairment? It should be done at the earliest so that it can be used, maximized, or in an efficient way. Now, when we look at the term the resource maintenance, what does it mean? That the resource maintenance is the process of utilizing various types of resources efficiently and effectively. And for this efficient and effective utilization of resources, what are the things should be taken care of? That is proper utilization, care and maintenance of school resources. It constitutes a vital aspect of school management. And what are the things that to make ensure that a clean, orderly, safe, cost-effective and instructionally supportive school complex that enhances education. So generally, as a head of the school, what is important? The school complex, not only the school complex, the concept of school complex is very much important. So whether the atmosphere is okay, along with the learning environment or the ambience of the learning environment, it should be taken into account, and whether a clean and safe and appropriate environment is ready to provide for the learners. Next, we are going to discuss about the need and importance of resource maintenance. When we look at the need and importance, we can classify it into 4 types, that is, bridge the capacity versus demand gap proactively, improving effective resource utilization, minimize the cost significantly, use scarce resources effectively. The first point that to discuss is bridging the capacity versus the demand gap effectively. So the capacity, how much we can include, or how much in the existing situation, how much students we can accommodate, that is an important thing. So after taking the mode enrollment, if the resources are not sufficient, we cannot satisfy the learners. So bridging the capacity versus the demand gap proactively. Aheadly, we have to plan for that type of management. And the next point, that is improving effective resource utilization. So whatever resources is existing at the particular moment, whether we are utilizing it or just purchasing for the namesake and keeping it and not utilizing it properly. That thing we have to take into consideration. And coming to the next point, that is minimize the cost significantly. We cannot spend for more. That you may notice that the earlier session, which is on the machine learning, machine translation, it incurs lot of expenditure, but whether the cost can be accommodated by the particular institution or all the institution can accommodate that type of cost, that is an important thing. So here, what is available? Suppose the human resources may be available, the digital resources may be available, the financial resources. Different types of resources are having in the form of the umbrella term of resources. Then use scarce resources effectively. What does this scarce resource denotes? When we look at the scarce resource, we can see that suppose in the lab equipments, the acid that we use, the chemicals that we use may be scarcely available. So how do we make use of these scarce resources effectively is an important point when we handle the lab equipments. So let us see how we can classify the school resources. When we try to classify, we can classify it as the human resources, physical resources, and financial resources. So these three types of resources are available in any institution. So let us come to the point of the physical resources. When we look at the physical resources, the head of the school is a physical resource, the teachers, the students, the support staff. So everybody comes under the physical resources. And more than that, when we look at the physical resource, the community, the supervisory staff, the functionaries of the education department constitute the human resources. And as the school head, you are required to deal, interact, and liaise with all these people, especially the members of your teaching and non-teaching staff and the learners on a regular basis. So what is important for a head of the school? The resources that should be in mind of the teacher or the head of the school, that they have to think how to utilize these physical resources. That is an important aspect when we think of the resources. So regularly, they have to interact with these type of the people. That may be the community members while conducting any PTA meeting, the parents and the students, the teachers, the support staff. So how as a school head they are managing or listening with this type of human resources is an important thing. So what are the guidelines for dealing with people? When we think of the guidelines, we can see that always try to be just, impartial and considerate to your learners and subordinates. Always try to follow the democratic style of functioning, of course without losing your authority as the head. While dealing with members of the community, be tactful and use all your persuasive skills to enlist their support and cooperation for resource preservation and maintenance. So what is important as a school head? The school head has to ensure that to get the participation of all the teachers, of all the support staff in running the school in a proper and effective way. For this, what is important, that is the impartial attitude on the part of the head of the school. And the democratic style, we know that as a leadership, we can adopt different kinds of styles. And what is the best style when we look into, we can see that that is the democratic style of leadership, where the voices of all is heard in the school so that the concerns can be taken into consideration. And we can see that while dealing with the members, the tactful and persuasive skills is very much important. So, in a tactful manner, the head of the school should deal with the people. And coming to this human resources, that managing people is an important skill that a head of the school should acquire. Because nowadays, managing machines, it is somewhat easy, but managing people is becoming difficult, because getting the equal and the coordinative effort of all human resources is very much important. Coming to the physical resources, which is the second resource, that is the physical resources, we can see that the physical resources include the entire infrastructure. So the entire infrastructure include the school plant, the buildings, classrooms, office, furniture, library, books, laboratories, toilets, water hut, equipments, teaching aids, electronic applicants, play material, playgrounds, garden, etc. And in these physical resources, we can make another classification also, the digital resources. Because now we know that in all the schools, in all the institutions, it is compulsory to integrate ICT. And now it has come to the level of integration of AI. So in this aspect, the physical resources, are we able to provide effectively in a particular institution? That is an important thing that we have to ask. Now coming to the point of the financial resources, which is an important part that includes the finances that are required to meet the expenditure on staff salaries, purchase of materials, repairs of equipment and fixtures, payment of electricity, telephone or other bills, or income generated from students' fees, donations, etc. So here the financial resources not only include the expenses, but it also include the income that an organization receives. So mainly when we look at a school as an institution, what are the income that receives is, it may be in the form of the students' fees, the donations, all the things, the grants, different types of grants. So all these things comes under the category of the income. So in the case of the financial resources, how a head of school is managing. Suppose before the beginning of a financial year, they should manage ahead that whether all the resources can be available in the current academic year. So this should start, the financial thing should start in the previous academic year itself. Whether the budget is sufficient, whether the budget is not sufficient, how to procure more money. So that process should start ahead, not after starting or getting the demand from the teachers. So planning ahead is an important part that a school head should do. So this ahead planning is very much important. And now coming to the principles of resource maintenance, they have to practice some principles such as the playgrounds, open yards, approach roads, lanes, gardens, flower beds or trees, plants, bushes within the school compound must also be regularly maintained, irrigated and trimmed, so that an atmosphere which shows that welcoming all we can extend to the students and to the newcomers. All parts of the school plan, its building, classrooms, office, laboratories, library, storeroom, medical room, water hut, staircase and boundary walls must be well maintained. And we know that there are some spaces or places where the least attention is going on. For example, the toilets. We have to repair it, whether it is usable, whether it is not using for the 24 hours, but we have to make attention for the least thing also. And why this type of playgrounds, the gardens, that is very much important. A school plant, we can see that there are different shapes that a school plant can be built. There may be the I structure, the H structure, the G structure. So different types of structure of the school plan we can see, and this, from the structure itself, it shows whether the school is diverse, is able to meet the diverse needs, whether the school is accommodating all or the school is welcoming all. That is an important part on the school. So the head of the school should taken into consideration of all these things. And regarding the laboratories, the libraries, whether it is sufficient, the books are sufficient to distribute to all learners. So whether the staff is sufficient or with a limited staff. Now what is happening because of the introduction of the digital resources, the manpower is reducing. So what is happening is that without the manpower, the digital resources alone cannot utilize. So the manpower is also, human resources is also important as well as the digital resources. The next principle, when we look at the library, the equipment room, the medical room, office, classrooms, laboratories must be neatly arranged and maintained. So the room-wise inventories listing all items placed in the room may be prepared and displayed on every location. All school purchases must be maintained in good condition. So this purchasing of the materials, whether the inventory register and the stock register is entered properly, whether the registers are maintained properly, or when we look at the registers, the stock registers, maybe all the stocks may not be entered, and for some academic year it may not be entered. So all these things should be taken into consideration by the school head and make the support staff to do the work in advance. The next point, that is goods and materials shown in the school stock must be frequently checked, physically verified and controlled to ensure their optimum and effective use and proper storage. The next principle, the all school purchases must be used for the purpose for which they were actually bought. Suppose when we look at the thing that some of the resources what we have purchased, for example, the social science lab or the science lab, whether it is purchased for the namesake and if they are not utilized for the students. Because of the scarcity of the resources, if we are not utilizing, what is the purpose? Is we cannot meet the purpose. For what purpose the resources are purchased. So this should make ensure by the head of the school. Before the beginning of the school, they have to make ensure what are the resources available or the chemicals, the equipments and even the little things also. They can make an eye upon it. So the proper utilization of all the resources is to be done by the teachers, and the students should get the exposure. Otherwise, just teaching the theory part alone will not serve for the practical purposes. For the lab equipments, if the students are not getting the opportunity, they cannot even identify what are the different types of apparatus, what are the different purposes of these apparatus, how to do the experiment. All those things are very much important when we think in terms of the different types of the resources. So all the school purchases must be used for the purpose for which they are actually bought. Otherwise, it cannot be done properly. Now the point comes how to select and organize resources. And in this context, some points should be taken into consideration, such as managing time, then managing space and equipments, managing activities, allocating resources equitably. So all these four aspects are very much important when we look at the different aspects. So the first point, that is managing time. How to manage time is a very much important part. And the next one, the space and the equipment. Suppose purchasing of the lot of the equipments may not be able to produce in the school or fix in the school because of the space shortage, and how to manage the activities and allocate resources equitably for the different purposes is important. So there are some kinds of constraints when we look that. The constraints may be as the part of the lack of adequate funds. So these adequate funds should be provided, and the budget should be prepared in ahead, and then the granting expenditure approvals. For getting approvals, it takes a lot of time. So what is important for getting the approvals? It should be sent earlier. So in the previous academic year itself, that approval should be taken, and the reasonable strategy to use school funds follow prescribed procedures. So the appropriate funds we have to ensure. And then when we come to the ICT, we know that now this ICT is becoming an important part, and this ICT can be used for the admission purpose and for taking attendance of students and for this learner management system where we can check the progress of the learners. So this ICT and for the attendance of the staff also. So here we can manage different types of things through the introduction of the ICT. And now the financial thing also we can make it available in use of these ICT resources so that the manual error can be reduced. That is, and then we can retain it for a long time, and with a one click we will get all the things in one place itself. So as a school head, you have come to know about what is resource maintenance and what is the role of ICT in resource maintenance. Hope that you can manage a school not as an administrative task, for this as a pedagogical leadership and as a good resource maintainer that is important on the part of the school head. Thank you.